This would have been 1983, and Dad left us when I was 10 years old. He ran off with another woman. There was a new church that was coming to town. We were meeting in the piano player's living room. Paul Stevens was sent there. My whole life had been defined by rejection. So he came around the corner, and his face lit up. Since my parents' divorce, I'd never had anyone look at me like that. He didn't look at me at what I was, but instead he saw what I could be. And just the look on his face as I watched him, I got saved right there. When the gospel message came that your life could be something, I just gave myself 100% to the church life and being a Christian.
How did you eventually become the Evangelist Craig McLaughlin you are today?
So the first part about accepting and finding God's will for your life is you have to come to an agreement in your mind and in your heart that there is a will of God for you. You've got solid ideas of what God wants for you, and then He has to direct you to find the specific within that. It is clearly unclear. In the process of just serving the platform of ministry, serving wherever I can, God began to shape it and form it to where He wanted me to be.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Light It Up podcast. Today, we are joined by Evangelist Craig McLaughlin. Thank you so much, Pastor, for joining us.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure to be here.
Today, we're going to be opening up a little bit, or looking into, rather, your ministry and how God works in that with spiritual discernment. And you talked about specifically hearing from God in your ministry. So we're going to be diving into that, how important it is to obey God's voice, not only in your ministry, but in your everyday walk. And just asking some clarifying questions of how we can walk in God's voice and obey God's voice and even hear from God in our everyday decisions. But for the first half of this episode, we kind of want to dive into your testimony a little bit. You've been saved for 41 years. I think a cool little detail is that you were in Pastor Paul Stevens' second ever church service. That's right. You know, for that church being established for so long and now being a conference center, you know, that's just so cool to hear that. So we're going to hear more of that, and that you've been in ministry since you were 19 years old. And so we're going to dive deep into that, ask some questions, and then we're going to kind of expand and elaborate on what it means to hear from God and how we can operate in that. But to start off, though, can we just hear a little bit of your childhood and how you got saved?
Yeah, sure. So I came into the Cape Cod church. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school. So the church itself started actually from Pastor Warner. His mother really was the key influence of how that church came. And so this would have been 1983. And at that time, our fellowship wasn't really launching churches much further than Phoenix. So there was only one other church on the East Coast. Mark Curley was there up in Santa Mas. And so Pastor Warner's mom had obviously come to Tucson a number of times, got saved through his ministry there, but still lived in Massachusetts. And so I guess she just kept bugging him. You know, send us a church, Harold. Send it, do it for your mother. And eventually he finally said, "Well, if you can get some people together, we'll see what we can come up with." And so Lolly Warner, that's Pastor Warner's mom, went to a lady whose name is Sabre Stockdale. She owned the only Christian bookstore, probably within 100 miles. Wow. So every Christian that was in that area would come to her store to buy something eventually. Wow. So she knew all the Christians everywhere. And a lot of them were all linked together through Alcoholics Anonymous or NA, AA, either one of those. And so they all had these little Bible studies they were doing. And so my mom had become a Christian. My dad left us when I was 10 years old. He ran off with another woman and left my mom and the three kids by herself. And so she'd become a Christian as a result of that, which is really a funny story because she was getting her hair done. So she's sitting in the hairdresser's chair, and the hairdresser starts to witness to her.
Wow.
And she was part of this Bible study group and gave her a chick tract, if you remember the chick tracts. Yep. And on the back, it said, the Potter's House, Ruth Street, Prescott, Arizona. So they had come from, evidently they went out there for one of the conferences and came home with these chick tracts. And so, this was, 6 years before the church was ever there. Wow. On the Cape, that God was already putting everything into place for that church to arrive. And so my mom was part of the Bible study, and she had heard that there was a new church that was coming to town, so she went to the first service and brought me to the second service. We were meeting in the piano player's living room, the lady who owned the bookstore. And so that's the first time I heard the gospel. It was Paul Stevens was sent there.
Wow.
And that was middle of February, and I got saved.
Wow. And how old were you when you got saved?
Yeah, 16. So I just turned 16 in like 2 months. So I was just getting started. I had a friend that was killed walking home from work one night. It was a dark, rainy New England evening. He was a busboy at a local restaurant, so he's dressed in black. And the sidewalk had been flooded, so he walked out into the street to get around the puddle that was blocking the sidewalk. And just a dark, stormy night, late at night, it was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night after the restaurant closed, and he was in the middle of the road wearing black, and the guy didn't see him and hit him and killed him instantly. And so I shared a gym locker with him. We were in a number of classes. We're in the marching band together. He'd been a friend of mine for a number of years. And so I knew him really well. And I went down the bus stop the next morning, not knowing what had happened, and Rebecca Jason was down there. She goes, "Hey, did you know Chris Cusack?" I said, "Yeah, I know Chris. Yeah, I'll see him this morning." She goes, No, you won't. He died last night." Wow. I was like, "What?" And so that really shook me. This was about a week before Christmas. And so I remember going to the funeral, and our marching band played at the graveside as we're lowering his body down into the grave. We were playing one of the songs from our slow section of our marching band score that year. And I remember thinking to myself, what is life, right? I mean, 16-year-old kids are not supposed to die. 60-year-old people are supposed to die, not 16. And it just shook me, and I didn't know what I was experiencing, but it was God was getting me ready to be saved. Wow. Really ready. And so emptying me of myself. And I remember being so restless. I'd go to sleep at night and I couldn't sleep, and I just was empty and didn't even know what it was. It was God getting me ready to hear this sermon about getting saved and becoming born again. And so when I went to that church service, I was ready. I didn't even know I was ready, but I was ready. And I heard the gospel and got saved.
Wow. So what was your mindset with that before getting saved? What was your mindset on God, and how did you feel about him?
Well, I didn't think much about him, obviously. We didn't have a good church. They were in a really Catholic area, so that was pretty obvious to all the churches around were Catholic, and that meant nothing to me. My mom had been raised Catholic, and she got out of it when she married my dad, who was a Protestant, and they just weren't church-going people at all. And so when my dad left, I was, pretty rejected by that, obviously, 10 years old. And so I just hated men, hated male authority, hated male teachers, hated the police, hated the principals, hated my band director, anybody that was a man, and hated my dad. And then God, Father God, well, I hate him too. Until all of a sudden I didn't. Until I went to church and found out he's a forgiving God. Wow. So I remember sitting in the chair. I was sitting in the corner of the house there in the Lazy Boy recliner, and all these people were in that house at that time, and there were a bunch of old women that were part of this Alcoholics Anonymous group, and and so the pastor, Stevens, he's coming down the hallway, and he's about to turn the corner which is the bedroom. He's just left the prayer room. He's coming into the living room where all the church is set up, and every new pioneer pastor is coming out of the prayer room wondering what his church is going to look like today. So he's sticking his head out, and he walks in the room, and from the angle that I'm sitting, I can see him, but he hasn't come around the wall yet enough to see me. And so I can see him, and I see him looking at Sabre Stockdale, who's an old woman, looking at Lolly Warner, who's an old woman, looking at Sandy Connors, he's an old woman, Bev Lazarus, an old woman. He's looking around the building at all these old women. Then he turns the corner, he steps in, and he sees me. And man, his whole face transformed. Well, you know how we look at young men when they walk into church. Mm-hmm. My whole life had been defined by rejection. And it's weird when you're under the curse of rejection. Thanks to Pastor Mitchell's study, we learned all this. When you're under that spirit and that curse of rejection, you do things to become more rejected. It's like that's your safe place, is when everybody hates you. And so I did everything I could to make everybody not like me, and that somehow was, in a weird way, how I felt safe. And so he came around the corner, and most people would look at me in disgust, revulsion, just in rejection. But his face was the exact opposite. he looked around and said, whoa, we got a teen boy here. Here's a disciple. Here's a future Bible study leader, a future preacher, a future, who knows what, pastor, missionary, who knows what. And his face lit up. And I had never had anyone since my parents' divorce. I'd never had anyone look at me like that.
Wow.
And he didn't look at me at what I was, but instead he saw what I could be. And just the look on his face as I watched him look at me with potential and with hope for what I could be, I got saved right there. Wow. Right there. I didn't even know it. Putting my hand up at the end of the service was a formality. It was when he looked at me, Jesus made himself real. And I said, here's a guy who's committed himself. Just by the look in his eye, he's committed himself to me. And I will follow him anywhere. Wow. And so that's how I got saved. Wow. And, of course, his voice scared me to death. The guy swallowed a bass woofer. His words go right through my body, And so I got saved, and then I did everything I could to be like him. Wow. As much as I could. I did everything he did. And I came to church because he was going to be there. I didn't know anything about Jesus. I came because Paul Stevens was there. And he shook my hand, and he treated me with dignity. He treated me like a young man. And so I started following him and immediately became committed. Nobody had to follow up on me. I came to every service after that just to be around Paul Stevens.
Wow. That's wild.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I love that. So rejection, I feel like, is such it's a concept that a lot of us hear about but don't understand. And you've explained it really well as you've told us how Pastor Paul Stevens solved it. But in the midst of rejection, did you ever see your own rejection, or did you ever acknowledge it, or was it?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I had no idea that that's what I was facing.
Right.
I just thought life was miserable, and this is how normal is.
Right.
Because, you're raised up. I'd never lived life before to know that there was any other way you could live. Mm-hmm. So it was defined by that. Wow. So, when he began to speak that there's a vision that your life could be something and that you could go somewhere and God could use you, man, I was willing to embrace that because I didn't think my life had any value. It wasn't headed in any direction. I was just 16 years old at that time. It was Reagan and Gorbachev, so nuclear war was the end of the Cold War. That was a real prospect. There was this new disease. It was called GRIDS, which had turned into AIDS, and everybody was freaked out about that. I didn't know anything about that. I mean, we lived in very uncertain times, and so I was, just afraid. Everybody was afraid, just for life. So when the gospel message came that your life could be something, wow. I just gave myself 100% to the church life, wow. and being a Christian.
Wow. Was it very easy to lock in? Because you said that beforehand you rejected a male in authority, and then now you said that you immediately clocked in.
Well, I'll tell you what made
what was that
difference.
process?
The process for me is when I discovered that God is real and I had him wrong. I had him wrong. What my rejection was a safeguard because I'd never experienced any unconditional love like that. And so when Pastor Stevens looked at me, he didn't know anything about me, but anything he might have found wouldn't have mattered. I could read on his face. I could see in his eyes that it didn't matter what I was or what I had been. I'm a new creature. Wow. It's like a blank slate that he can form, and he was excited at the prospect of, I can't wait to get my hands on this kid to see what I can do, teach him about the things of God. I could read it on his face. It's like Jesus made himself real to me through Paul Stevens' eyes. Wow. But it was more than that. Because at the end, when I actually did lift my hand at the end of the service, given the altar call, it's like I did have a personal experience with God at that time. So have you ever had somebody walk up behind you and they're there, but you can't see them? Yeah. That's exactly what it was like. It's like I saw Jesus that day with everything but my eyes. I could see him in a change in my heart and my perspective. And Pastor Stevens, the way he looked at me, I could feel the guilt and the shame of my sin. I could falling off of me. I could sense all of that. It's like I saw Jesus with everything but my eyes. And so how could I not give myself to this all the time?
Yeah.
How could I? So follow-up was no problem. I was pushing everybody in the house. Let's go. We got to go to church. What do you mean there's no church today? Oh, I was so sad about that, Monday night, no church. Tuesday night, I got to wait till Wednesday? Are you kidding? Just to be around that atmosphere and to be in that presence, because I felt a reality of God. And so any thoughts I had about I hate God now were gone after that. I'm hating somebody I don't know. But now that I know him, I know he's not what I thought he was.
Wow.
So it was very easy for me to follow him. I had no adjustment. And I was pretty heavy into the marching band, and so I was super committed to playing. I played trumpet all through high school, and still play trumpet. And played on song service, for years. And so I was all about music. I was all about the jazz band, the marching band, the concert band. And so I was 100% committed to that. And it was very easy for me to just simply take the commitment toward the band and just slide it over to church.
Wow.
So I was already used to being in discipline, under discipline, and marching band kind of a, we would schedule, and we'd keep that schedule, and that came first above everything. Well, now God comes first, and so it was easy for me to make that transition. Yeah.
So you're saved now. You're all in for God. How do you get from there to becoming an evangelist? You pastored as well for a little bit, and how did you eventually become, the evangelist Craig McLaughlin you are today?
Yeah, well, that's always the challenge, isn't it? How do you end up where you end up, man? I get that question more than anything, probably, as I travel. Is how do I know God's will for my life? Well, you fall into it, usually.
Yeah.
So what had happened was, I'm in my pursuit of whatever Pastor Stevens was doing, wanting to be with him and be around him. I just began to serve him. So, I'd follow him around the building. If he's straightening out chairs, I would straighten out chairs. If he's, vacuuming, I would be vacuuming. If he's cleaning the toilets, I would watch. I'd follow him around. I'd sit next to him in prayer. I'd try and sit on his lap, la vida da coria, la vida da choria, and I'd do everything. I would mimic him. And so I'm 16 years old. I'm wearing a 3-piece suit, carrying a briefcase.
Wow.
There's nothing in it but a couple of pencils, but he's doing that. And so I wanted to be like him. And so when he started talking about his testimony of how he dropped out of high school, never went to college, and just had a call of God, and explained discipleship. So many of our churches, the discipleship process is already established when most people come in.
Yeah.
But in our congregation, it had to start from the beginning. I remember when he began to preach sermons and float the idea that one day you guys are going to preach the gospel. One day you're going to stand in other nations. And we're like scratching our heads going, are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? How's that even possible? You don't have to go to Bible college. We're thinking about how do you do that? What college do we go to do that? He's like, no, we'll train you and disciple you. And he's explaining the whole process. And we're trying to learn and accept this. And so, as a result, everybody's telling me I'm called. Because they're looking at me going, young guy, motivated, 100% all in, serving, following Pastor Stevens as this little replica of him. And they're all telling me, you're called, you're called, you're called. And I'm like, well, I'm not called for anything. I'm going to blow my trumpet forever. So the first part about, accepting and finding God's will for your life is you have to come to an agreement in your mind and in your heart that there is a will of God for you, that God does have a plan, and that is worth finding it. And so everybody's pushing me, and then I naturally resisted because everybody's pushing me. And I couldn't see it. All I could see, typically most of us when we first start to feel a call, is we feel like Moses. I can't talk, and I don't have any skills, and I don't know what I'm doing, and how do you want me to, we start hitting with all these excuses. And I couldn't imagine, being a preacher, a public speaker for the rest of my life, that is what God wanted for me, because I was so terrible at public speaking. I was so insecure about what people thought. I remember one time in 10th grade, we had a book report to do, and I actually read the book, which is a miracle, and I wrote the report, and then we got to class, and the teacher decided, okay, we're going to change it and do oral book reports. So stand up in front of the crowd and read your report. And I lied to the teacher and said I didn't have it done. I took a 0, so I wouldn't have to stand in front of the crowd. I mean, I didn't want that at all.
Yeah.
I was just nervous. I was so insecure. And so the thought of being a preacher was just like, no, there's no way that's going to happen. So everybody's telling me, and I'm just pushing it away. And then the beginning was Paul Campo, who eventually took over the Cape Cod Church. At the time, he was in El Paso, and he came to preach a revival in our congregation. And he had just come back from England doing something over there, and he went to a place there in London where he was a big Beatles fan, and of course he's a musician, and there's a song, Eleanor Rigby, dedicated to all the lonely people, and there's a park somewhere there in England that has a bench, and this lady, a statue of this lady sitting on this bench, and it's supposed to represent Eleanor Rigby. And so he's, doing one of these tear-jerker videos, go ye into all the world kind of videos, and who's going to reach the Eleanor Rigby's, and he's got the music playing in the background, and he's preaching this sermon, man, and I'm just getting cut to ribbons in my spirit, man. God's just all over me. And I was in tears, man. I just came down to the altar and started just praying, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Okay, if you want me to preach, I'll preach. And at the end of that, we stood up at the end of the altar call, and Paul Campo said, brother, whatever God just spoke to you, that's his will for your life.
Wow.
So I kind of settled it in my heart to serve in this capacity.
Wow.
I wanted to serve God. I was serving pushing the vacuum. I was serving setting the chairs up. I was serving in the church however I could. I was playing on the platform at that time as a form of service. And so everything that came out of my life in any future ministry all just came from a platform of serving. And then God directed my service into the specifics of what he wanted me to do and where he wanted me to do it. So I had to come first to the decision that, okay, I will preach the gospel, and then begin to pursue that.
Wow.
So I don't know if I mentioned it to Pastor Stevens or how it happened, but I just graduated high school in 1984. I'm 17. And I was doing some work near the church building, and I saw Pastor Stevens was there. And our building was connected, actually, in a storefront to a convenience store. So I stopped in the convenience store and got a Coke or something and went into the church and saw him studying there and just, spent a minute to talk to him. This is my mentor. This is my daddy. And so I'm talking to him, and he goes, you know what? We started a music scene there on Saturday nights. And he says, you know what? Next week, not this Saturday, but the Saturday after, I want you to preach the altar call. Wow. I'm like, what? Would you do it? Would you preach the altar call? I'm like, sure. Because I had resolved in my heart that part of God's will for my life is that I would be asked to do something. And that's how I know that would be confirmation. Because, here's the problem. What do you want to do for God? What do I want to do? I want to do everything for God.
Yeah.
And anything. I marvel when people say, oh, I want to go to this city, or I feel a burden for that country. And people say, where do you want to go? I want to go everywhere. Who do you want to reach? I want to reach everyone. Yeah. I can't narrow it down to just one. I need God to show me what he wants me to do when he wants me to do it. So I came up with the idea at an altar. God, I'll know it's your voice and it's your will when somebody asks me to do something. And he asked me.
So when that mindset, because it's realistically to the down, it's a servant mindset. I'm going to serve God. Is there a reason behind why you're called for everything, and then someone else is called specifically for something?
Not that I've ever. I can't say I've ever put together. Some people hear more clearly. Maybe some tools are fashioned a little differently. Right. So I was just one of those people that didn't feel a burden for any one place. I felt a burden for every place. And some people are very specific in their target range, what they're looking to do for God. I was just, I don't know, I'm just wired that way. Other people are wired different ways. So I don't think one is better than the other or one is worse than the other. It's just, revelation comes through human personality, and the will of God is also revealed differently in human personality.
I think it's interesting. We're doing a podcast episode about hearing from God, but what you've been talking about are these places where you've been able to see God through them, not necessarily like from hearing God's voice, but you've been able to see Jesus through Pastor Paul Stevens, and you were able to hear where exactly God wanted you to go and what he wanted you to do through what Pastor Paul Stevens was asking you to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very interesting because we can build boundaries around the voice of God. I'm speaking for myself here, but we can build boundaries around hearing from God to being so specific in how we want to hear from him, whether it's his voice or some sort of miracle we want and confirmation we want, that we kind of restrict ourselves to any other avenue that God can use to influence and inspire our lives. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering, like, is that something we need to be aware of and something we need to be cautious of in restricting God's voice to just his voice or hearing straight from him, and being open even to what our pastor's saying as hearing from God and being inspired from God? And if we do need to be more cautious about that, how do we be cautious or mindful about what we hear from God when it's not directly from him?
Well, we have to all ministry is filtered through a single platform, and that platform is service. I'm going to serve.
Right.
I'm going to serve. Whatever it is you want me to do, God, I will do it, and you say yes. But in that, there has to come the specifics of what exactly is it you want me to do, the specifics of it. And many times that is so not clear. Right. So I was just, even this morning, I was working, before we sat down to do this, I was working on a sermon I'm putting together about the clearly unclear will of God. Because so much of it is crystal clear, and yet so much of it is totally ambiguous and covered in darkness. So the text I was using was Mark 11. We'll pull a little Bible into this podcast. And it's, Jesus wants to ride into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. So he sends his two disciples to go get the donkey.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right? We all know that story. Mm-hmm. But I was looking at it differently as I was reading it just in my regular Bible reading. How, I'm like, look at how clear and totally unclear that command is.
You'll find a donkey somewhere.
Well, that's it. He told them. He told them almost exactly where to find it. Wow. Almost exactly. So he laid out, I want you guys to go over to the village over against you. Meaning, so however they were standing on the mountaintop or wherever they were standing on the path, he was talking about behind you, over against you. That means turn around and go that way. He gave them very specific direction. Gave them a very clear goal, find a donkey that has never been ridden. He told them specifically, you're going to be challenged. Somebody's going to come out and say, what are you doing with this donkey? And you answer, the Lord hath need. So you're going to be challenged. There's going to be a little bit of pushback. But tell him the Lord hath need. You stand against any persecution you might feel. You stand on the Lord hath need, and that's the most important. And then the breakthrough will come, and you'll also get the resources you need. The guy will say, okay, well, then take the donkey. And that's exactly what happened. So they had so much of it crystal clear. But yet when they get to town, where's the donkey? The donkey is the goal. But who knows where it is? Wow. I mean, it would have been nice if Jesus said, no, once you get into town, you'll cross the center where the well is, look to the left, and there's a house with a red door, and the donkey's around the back. Or look to the right, and you'll find a donkey that's tied up with a yellow rope. Mm-hmm. He didn't say any of that. So here, you've got solid ideas of what God wants for you. And then he has to direct you to find the specific within that. I knew God wanted me to preach, but I didn't know what he wanted me to do, to pastor, to evangelize, to be a missionary, or whatever. So a lot of it is, well, I guess we'll know it when we see it, right? We'll know it when we see it. And that's Abraham, who's looking for a city, who's builder, his foundations, who's builder and maker is God. Well, how do you know? I mean, he comes to him, gave him very clear direction. I want you to go where you've never been, take all that you have, leave everything you've ever known, and wait for a promise you've never seen. But you'll know it when you see it. Huh? How's that work, man? And so it's the same story when Jesus sent two of his disciples. I wonder if it was the same two guys to find the upper room for the Passover. Wow. He said, you guys go down into town and you'll find a guy with a pitcher of water. You follow him to the house. I mean, it's very clear direction.
Just
but
bullying
yet it's
the same two disciples.
I wonder if it's the same two guys.
It was James and John.
The Sons of Thunder, yeah.
Exactly. So they've got some experience. But here, I mean, they run into town and maybe it's a hot day and everybody's got a bottle of water. Maybe the town is, Restaurant Alley, and they're having a waiters convention, and everybody's got a bottle of water. How do you, right? I mean, so there's the challenge. God gives you a clear, listen, we're called to reach the world. Right. We're called to outreach. We're called to evangelize, make disciples, go into all the nations, make disciples, do all those things. But yet, the specifics of what you need to do have yet to be revealed. It is clearly unclear. And so I clearly made a decision, God, I'm going to serve, and unclear as to what exactly you want me to do. So therefore, my strategy was very simple. I'm going to do everything. If I'm going to pastor a church one day, which is what I think God might want me to do, then I better learn all the ins and outs of everything. So I sang in a band. I learned an instrument so I could play in a band. I did Bible studies. I was the song leader. I ran the choir. I did outreaches on my own to learn how to do it, where I went down to City Hall, had to pull permits, had to do a parade. We did a Memorial Day parade in my town. That was different than where the church was, and I set that whole thing up. And so I did everything in the church I could do except nursery, because they wouldn't let me in the nursery. Right?
No, the crazy part is because they wouldn't let him in the nursery. So
he wanted to be in the nursery.
And it's as I began to do everything that God began to direct to the specific.
Maybe he doesn't want you in nursery ministry.
Yeah, nursery's probably
just maybe.
Which is hilarious because I have so much fun with my grandkids. I love my grandkids. And I had no idea that was in me. I'd do great in nursery because I'd be just being there playing around. Because I guess at heart I'm a 3-year-old somewhere in there. But yeah, so I just began to do everything.
Lined up as you followed the.
As I followed, right? Okay, so you want the story? Here's the story. So I was in a band. And we were 4 single guys. So we had no wives, no real commitments like family commitments. So every Saturday we were out of town on an outreach somewhere, ministering in these smaller baby churches. And of those 4 guys, I was the only preacher. And so I'm now 19 years old, playing in this band, and one of the pastors was going out of town. And he called up my pastor, Paul Campo, and said, listen, I need somebody to come and cover service. Could you send Craig? And he's like, Craig? What do you want Craig for? Well, because he's here with the band. Everybody knows him. People like him. They're used to him being the preacher because he does all the altar calls. And there's people in our church who have been saved when he did the altar calls. So there's connection. And I think it'd be good to have him because, the big fear every pastor has is when you go out of town, pastor's away, the sheep will sleep in. He's like, maybe if Craig comes, the attendance won't go down while I'm out of town. And Pastor Campbell's like, oh, that's a good idea. So he called me up and he asked me, would you be willing to go and cover this service? And I'd never preached a full sermon before. I've done some Bible studies, and I was on the rotation in the music scenes and done lots of outreach altar calls, but never a full sermon. So I put 2 services together, Sunday morning, Sunday night, went and I preached them. And the report, I guess, afterwards came back. The church told the pastor, who then told my pastor, they said it was like having a one-day revival with an evangelist.
Wow.
So I didn't know that. I'm just being myself.
Just serving.
Well, at that time, there were 2 other things that happened that were significant in this time frame. So, actually 3 things. So the first thing that happened was I had a roommate, Keith Sullivan. You might have heard of Keith Sullivan. He was on staff in Prescott for a while. He's now in Rochester, New York. We were roommates at the men's house. And so, we're just, having one of those late night conversations that roommates have in the things of God. We're just laying in bed and talking about what we want to do for God. Separate beds, bro. Okay. Separate beds. No, I saw that face. Separate beds.
We've had those conversations before.
Right,
so.
Yeah. What do you want to do
separate
for God?
Beds.
And so he's telling me all the things he wants to do for God. And at that point, I did not know what I wanted to do.
Right.
I just wanted to live for Jesus. I just wanted to serve and be pleasing to God. And he was the first one whoever said, I could see you as an evangelist.
Wow.
Really? I was so surprised when he said that, and so I began to kind of think it and mull it over. So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened, I did not know, was there's a pastor on the East Coast who was in New Jersey. His name was Doug Kuhneman. He's out of Tempe. And he had called Pastor Campo saying, listen, I need a revival. I need some help, but I can't afford much. Do you have any evangelists that are coming that you could cover the airfare and send them down to me? Everybody was from out west. We didn't have anybody on the East Coast at that time. And there was a need. And he said, I just can't afford it. Can you send me somebody? And then he made the statement to Pastor Campo, I wish we had a cheap evangelist on the East Coast. Ding, something clicked in Pastor Campo's mind. We got a guy who's bringing up a legitimate need. And then we have this other report that we have a young preacher that preaches like an evangelist. So he kind of put the two things together in his brain. That was the second thing that happened. Then the third thing that happened was I ended up going to talk to Pastor Campo just for some personal counseling. And while we were talking about the issues I wanted to ask him, I was having one of those moments of connection where he had time, I had time, and we were just really connecting. And I thought, I'm going to ask him every question I can think of because he's available. And so one of the things was this conversation I had with Keith Sullivan. What do you have to do to be an evangelist? Just totally out of the blue.
Wow.
He looked at me. I watched his eyes pop. He had no idea. I had no idea the two other things in his brain. Wow. We have a need. We have a guy that could maybe meet the need. And now that guy is standing here asking me about the need. Right?
Wow.
And he said, well, so he told me, you're out of town, you preach, you write a letter of introduction, you go do revivals, you get paid every third week. At that time, we were doing 3 in 1. And so he's like, well, why don't you think about it? Maybe that's what God's speaking to you about. I was blown away when I walked out of that office. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You an evangelist? I just came to you because first my life was a train wreck. And I'm talking about some issues that everybody saw but me, and then finally it all blew up, and I felt destroyed, And he's like, oh, you just blew your life up? I'll promote you. The kingdom works sometimes, right? You're perfect. Yeah. And so before I got back to him, I prayed about it, thought about it. I'm 19. I'm single. I'm not married, never pastored, not even dating. There's no way this could be me. And so before I got back to him with no, he got back to me and booked a meeting.
Wow.
Said, yeah, I called Doug Kuhneman and set you up a revival. Would you like to go preach the revival? He asked me. Well, what young enterprising disciple wouldn't take advantage of that? So I did.
Right.
And I went down and I did that revival. As a result, we had a good week. We had people saved, healed, filled with the Holy Ghost, all the things you want from an evangelist.
Wow.
I came back from that trip, and Pastor got me in the office that Sunday afterwards, because back then we did revivals Monday through Friday.
Wow.
If you can believe that. So I went down to New Jersey and drove down in my car and drove back, and man, I was just high on God. And then next time I saw a pastor, he said, I think we're going to announce you as a part-time evangelist.
Wow.
I'm like, wait, what? I had no idea that would. So, in the process of just serving the platform of ministry, serving wherever I can, God began to shape it and form it to where he wanted me to be.
Wow.
Exactly where he wanted me to be, when he wanted me to be there. Wow. So that's how it started as an evangelist. So then I ministered a long time, 4 years or so, as a part-time. And there'd be 6 or 8 or 10 months where I wouldn't get a meeting. I'd just cover services for guys. And they were happy to use me. All the churches were small and separated. Many of them were pretty far away from each other. And, we need all the help we can get. They were willing to have me. And then, I got a meeting here, got a meeting there. Things began to develop. And so I really got that going. And then we had the big church split that wiped out half of our churches on the East Coast. And then I had to, start all over again, where I built that up again. And finally got that ministry cranking. Took another 3 years, and then I was able to go full-time. Then I started getting some breaks out west, in the Southwest that really helped me. to get on the map there a little bit, and started to get some meetings. And so I was gearing up for my 4th year as an evangelist. I was happy. I had a full calendar. Had lots of people that wanted me to come. I had a few places where I wanted to go, and I didn't have to take every meeting that wanted me. I could say, no, I don't really want to go to that place. I said, yeah, I'm pretty full right now, which I was. And then next thing happened, I'm at a conference, Thursday night, a Bible conference, and I thought for sure, this is going great. I'm loving my life right now. And I get a tap on the shoulder and come back in the office, and Pastor wants to talk to you. I thought it was about something where I was doing video for our conference then. I was the guy. We had 3 cameras set up in the building, VHS cameras. This is back in the day, man. And so
kind of like what we got.
Yeah, well, you got iPhone, super, And so we were having trouble mixing those, and there were some technical glitches. And I thought he just wanted to have a conversation about that. And then when he told me to close the door behind me, I thought, oh, this is going to be a terrible conversation. And then I sat down in the chair, and he just kind of sat back in his desk and rubbed his chin like he does, He said, how long are you going to do this evangelist thing? I'm like, 1 more week? I didn't know what's up, man. He goes, well, listen, I got an issue here. We got a couple we have to bring back. No pressure. I got to replace this guy. No pressure.
No pressure. But...
No pressure. He said, I don't have anybody who can go. No pressure. If you don't go, I don't know what I'll do.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Is that exactly what he said?
That's exactly what he said.
No pressure.
And then he said, you ready?
No pressure.
Talk to your wife and let me know in an hour.
No pressure.
You want to know by the altar call. Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure.
The stress is on.
The stress is on. And so the whole time I'm thinking, oh, God. And I'm walking out of the office going, please, God, please, not New Bedford. Anywhere but New Bedford. I'm thinking to myself, anywhere but that town, So I sat down. I'm trying to talk to my wife during the break. Well, my pastor asked me. That's my sign. And how do you say no to your pastor when he asks you? And so I said yes, and it turned out to be Marietta, Georgia. We had a good church down there. Pastor needed to come home, and so I went and took it over. And we ended up in the Atlanta area for 5.5 years, and it's there that I got connected to Dave Suspansky. He was our area leader, and so we'd go to healing crusades that he would do, men's rallies and different things. It was about 8 hours from us, and I had him come to preach a revival for me. I wanted him to see Atlanta, hoping maybe he'd be inspired and launch a church there. Amen. And so we kind of became friends out of that. And so the decision, we were there 5.5 years, I decided I wanted to go back and evangelize, and we're having some trouble in the church, and it was time to make a good change there. And pastors had mentioned to me that Dave Suspansky was talking to him about needing an assistant in his church. And so he said, well, before you come back, why don't you call Dave? See if he needs some help there. You're in the South. You understand the mentality. Why don't you? So I called him up and made myself available. Hey, I'm thinking about going back to the Cape and going to evangelize again, but I heard you might need an assistant. He goes, well, I'm not going to make a decision for about a month. He said to me, and I said, all right. Well, so we just kept the church cruising along for a month, and then he called me back. And he said, no, we got a local guy here, Wayne King. I'm going to put him on staff, and he's still on staff today. Wow. He said, so, sorry. I said, okay, well, I guess we'll go back to the Cape. And then a week later, he called me back. A week later. He goes, I was thinking. Here we go. Oh, no. and he spoke to me the exact same situation as how I started. A lot of small churches that can't afford anybody to come out west. You could commute and save them hotel, sleep in your own bed, no airfare, and we need a cheap date. Well, that's me. I'm a cheap date. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you. Oh, my gosh, man. And he goes, come for 1 year and really help us. These churches need the dignity of being able to pay for their own revivals and get us over this hump. Just come for a year. I've got enough that I can support you. Enough churches in the area. I can send you to a couple of our guys, and I'll help you get started. And I'm like, well, here I am. Somebody asked me again. So I called Pastor Campo. I didn't even know you could do such a thing as that, to go to work out of a different church than the one you were saved in. Mm-hmm. And so I called him up, and he said, no, it's a great idea. I see the value of that. It's just like when you started here. Same scenario. He said, why don't you take a look at this, do it for a year, and we'll reevaluate at the end of the year. So I get to Jacksonville. I said yes. I went to move to Jacksonville. I never felt more like a guy coming off the bench in the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, only to grab rebounds. I'm here. I signed a 1-year deal, and then God just made it obvious for me to stay there. And I spent the next almost 3 years trying to figure out a way to get back to the Cape, my home church, and God just shut every door.
Wow.
I said, okay, I guess I'm going to stay here. And so I bought a house and raised my family, and 25 years later, I'm still there.
Here you are, yeah.
That's amazing.
So I never would have anticipated that.
Yeah.
Never would have planned it. That's just as I served in the general things, God directed me to the specifics.
Wow. So I love this, just everything you're talking about. It just makes so much sense. Especially for questions I've had, but I'm curious. Does this mean that we take anything that we hear about God as from God? Meaning in that, let's say by some random situation, like someone asks us to do something in the church, and it's for ministry, it's for the church, but it's something that we physically, financially, mentally cannot facilitate. Do I take that as from God, or are there instances when I need to find more clarity and seek more of God's approval on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
To both. You take it as God. It's an opportunity to serve, but you also do have to weigh, am I any good at this? And so part of the discipleship process is to figure that out. I got involved in everything to find out what I am good at and what I am not good at.
Okay.
And what they discovered is, as I volunteered, say, well, I'll help. I was asked to join the band. So it was Keith Sullivan was playing the bass. Then we had a guitar, drums, and the trumpet, me on the trumpet. So we're pretty limited, we did the best we could. So we were actually, that other church, Doug Kuhneman, before I ever preached revival down there for him, we went and did an outreach for him, and we were coming back through New York, and we were stuck in traffic on the George Washington Bridge. And one of the guys said, man, we could do so much more in our band if we had another guitar player. If we had a rhythm guitar to add 2 guitars, a bass, and the drums, like a traditional rock band. This was the 80s, And so everybody's like, well, who could we get? Who could we add? Who could we add? And then somebody said, once again, it was probably Sullivan. Half of my ministries come from Keith Sullivan. He said, I could teach you the bass. The bass? Me? He says, really? It's just one string when you start. So we're stuck in traffic on the bridge, and he taught me 3 songs.
Wow.
And just okay. So I started doing that. I learned I could play the bass. So I started playing the bass. Then they asked me to sing. The singer wanted to stop singing, so they asked me to sing. And we found out we need anybody else but me to sing. Right? Then they asked me to join the drama team. We said, why don't you join the skit team, man? Bro, you can play the devil. You're a natural, man. You don't even have to act. Right? Yeah. Story of my life, man.
Did they really say that to you?
Yeah.
Do you know what you'd be perfect for, actually? Joe Benedict, man. Yeah, so on we go. And so that's how a lot of things happen. And so you find out what you're good at. You find out what you're not good at. You do what you like to do. And then, and that's all part of the process of being led in that direction, right?
What God wants you to do. So, yes, you do take every opportunity, but you also have to figure out, is this more than I can handle? Because the worst thing is to commit to a ministry, yes, I can do this, and then you realize, man, between college, between whatever, all the 50,000 things I'm doing, my job, I can't be what you need me to be. And then you have to step out of something when you stepped in, because you let a lot of people down, and, it just ruins their hope, and it's just, so, you got to be wise as well. But you got to experiment. That's what discipleship is for in the home church, is to figure out these issues.
And so, really quick, I think just one quick question that comes to mind is because I've asked this question before to another pastor, just in the same context, but in relationships. Like, okay, what I've heard is that, like, we can tend to hyper-spiritualize this dating process, or we can tend to be so non-spiritual about it that it ends up being carnal. So in courting or in dating or in meeting someone, we can be so caught up in, like, God has to speak to me in order for me to pursue this person. Or it can be like, talked to her once, said hi, she said hi back, boom, put a ring on her. So like
God has told me to marry you, woman.
right, and so I feel like there are some instances where that happens, right? Maybe God speaks, but I feel like in what you're saying, there are practicals in hearing from God when it comes to the will of God. Like what I've heard is that learn if you like this person and if you can actually live with them for the rest of your life, and then see how God's calling can be involved in the both of you in that. Or, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm asking like, what is that the same balance with discipleship in the church and relationships, practicality and spirituality, or is there a different line that's drawn?
Yeah, well, practicality and spirituality for sure. I remember just my situation. I was having a hard time figuring this out. Leave it to two single guys on a podcast to eventually get to dating. What took so long to get here?
Okay.
Man? How did it take us?
That was my second question on the way over here. How did you meet your wife?
How did you meet your wife, man? Somewhere you have to be able to figure out.
We're just so caught up on the things of God. We just,
Look, man, I want to get married, man. I'm sick and tired of this single life.
Enough about you. I just want to talk about how I get married.
Yeah, well, I had a different. Wisdom, I struggled with it. Struggled as much as you guys struggled, but I did get a little help from my pastor. I was talking to him about something, and he gave me a list.
Okay.
So I sat down and I just said, Pastor, I'm feeling all this. I feel I need to get married. I'm frustrated. And he asked the simple question, well, who do you like? Huh? Who do you like? Oh, I need to like somebody? Right? It's like, oh, no, I need a wife so I can go pursue my destiny. It's like, no, you need a wife because you're in love with somebody. That needs to be number one. And I'm like, I never considered that. They said, well, let me help narrow it down. And he gave me a list of 5 girls. He rattled them off. He said, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here's 5 names. I think any one of these girls would be a good pastor's wife and be a good catch. And now just go, meet them, talk to them, see which one you like. I didn't even know you could do that. Right. So somewhere you're going to have to live with a person the rest of your life. It'd sure be nice if you liked them. And so my wife ended up being number 3 on the list.
Does she know about this?
Oh, yeah, everybody knew, man. They're like, he's on the prowl, Did you pass the test? Because we had a girls' house at the time, and I'm sure they had their own list. And so, we all wanted to find God's will and God's destiny more than we wanted to find a spouse because of somebody we loved and adored and wanted to spend the rest of our lives with. We decided that, the will of God, you need a spouse, and you got to have that, and you'll learn to love them over time. And that was kind of what the guys were thinking.
Wow.
And so, anyway, so that's as far as I go with giving dating advice.
Okay.
Because I don't want to be the guy that puts people together that shouldn't be together. You got to figure that out. All I can say, bro, is good luck, you guys. Good luck, man. You got to fight it out like we all did. You guys should ask me, when did you know you were called to be an evangelist?
Okay.
When did you know you were called to be an evangelist?
I'm so glad you asked me that question.
We're gonna make an edit and everything.
It's gonna sound like it was his question.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're gonna write out.
I was still wrestling with: do I go back to Cape Cod, where I'm from, my home church, or do I stay here in Jacksonville under Dave Suspansky? I was wrestling with that. And finally, I made the decision. It was an actual Mark Olson revival. He was preaching for us, and while he was preaching, just in the context of his sermon, I'm listening to him, and I'm going, I just need to stay here in Jacksonville. You know how those sermons sometimes answer questions while that you're asking? Yeah. I forget what he said, how he said it, but I remember thinking to myself, I just need to stay here in Jacksonville. That's God's will for me. Wow. And then at the end of the service, if you know Mark Olson, he doesn't give out a lot of words. All he does is take our money. That's all. But he ended up calling me out, and he just looked at me. I don't even know if he knew who I was, and he said, "Brother, what God just spoke to you is His will for your life. He just spoke it to you, didn't He?" And I went, "Yep." So the answer to your question: when did I know that I was called to be an evangelist? It was 3 years into my second time as an evangelist that I knew.
That's crazy.
Isn't that insane?
What?
When I tell that
Whoa,
story,
whoa,
people
whoa,
are like,
whoa,
wait, what?
How does that?
Wow.
Wait, explain that. Give
3
some
years.
details.
It was
That
3
doesn't-
years into my second time as an evangelist that I knew this is what I'm called for.
That's such a unique thing because you always get stories of people called beforehand. Even who was it? There was a pastor we had that I believe we had him on, or somebody I was talking to. He was like, when he got saved, he knew that he was called to be a pastor. He was like 12 at the time, and immediately God spoke to him that he's gonna be called to be a pastor. And it's like, that's crazy to hear that you went out into the field, preached, did revivals, probably gave words out and everything, and then came back
And had
Start a
not
whole
yet
new church.
fully embraced my calling for what it was, the specifics of that calling.
Wow. And so I feel that would be the same even for people who aren't called to preach. Maybe it's in this fashion, right? Like
try it out.
the first, they serve the church. Like let's not disqualify that. There are plenty of servants in the church who genuinely aren't called to preach, and they don't feel like God is calling them to preach. Now, I would think it's the same for them in that they serve the church. They're a pillar in their church for 5 years, saved, and then on the 5th year, God calls them to preach somewhere. Right, so I feel like even vice versa, that process can be flipped. Or even if they serve the church for their whole life and aren't really called and aren't ever called to preach, they think they're still a servant and they're still serving the church, right? Like they're still pursuing the call of God in their life, right?
Yeah, well, everything comes out of the platform of service. And so I was serving in whatever capacity and whatever door opened up. And if God opened up the door to evangelize, I gave myself to that. God opened up the door for me to pastor. I gave myself to that. I was still, even all those years as an evangelist, willing to do something else if God wanted me to. All those years as a pastor, I was willing to do something else if God wanted me to. And I would have done better and developed a lot quicker if I had just embraced it. But I was so open for God, you lead me where you want me to be, that I didn't give myself enough, if you know what I'm saying, to what I was doing in the moment.
Wow.
Like I needed to be, I'm pastoring this church. I need to give myself 100% to learning how to do this and understanding how to do this. I'm an evangelist. I need to not think about going out to pastor. I need to think about, I'm here as an evangelist traveling around asking pastors about pastoral things because I'm still trying to learn in case one day I'm going to be a pastor. So I should have developed myself differently, but at that point I didn't have this confirmation that this is what I was called. For me, I was called to serve God, and these were the doors he was opening for me. And I stepped through those doors and did the best I could in that position. It wasn't until, like I said, 3 years into my second time that I fully embraced, all right, this is all I'm going to do. And then my whole ministry changed because I gave myself to it as an evangelist, thinking long term. So then I began to pioneer other things in my life for successful evangelist ministry. Like moving in the gifts and word of knowledge, and began to really give myself toward that and develop that.
Wow.
So it's more of a, because it's a timing thing, the way you're making it sound like, if I'm not mistaken, right? So there's certain times that you hear his voice, or was it just due to the fact that at that time you're like, whatever you want, God, but you're like basically stepping back.
Yeah,
and saying,
it was whatever you want, God. Now, within the whatever you want, God, I would hear God's voice. God would speak to me in the specifics of what I'm doing.
Sing, don't sing, or play, don't play, maybe, right?
Yeah, but it's more than that. It would be, God would speak to me sermons that I could preach. I'm going to need this sermon, or God would help me find somebody that I need to give a word to and call them out. And so I would hear God's voice, yes, all the time. I would read my Bible, God would speak to me. I'd pray, God would speak to me.
Right.
But those life-altering will of God voice that he speaks, I want you to do this, and I want you to only do this, and I want you to do this now. You only hear those when God's ready to make a shift for you. Otherwise, you do the general things of God until he tells you something more specific.
Wow.
So that's kind of the shadow of death, valley of death. Like you don't know. It's like what we say, when you don't know what to do, you do which you know what to do.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's what I did. I did what I knew to do until God made it clear, okay, don't worry about any other thing but this one thing.
So was it the fact that he wasn't clear in the beginning, or was it more of a you?
Yeah, it was more of a me, probably. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never pondered about that. It is the way it worked out for me. This is how it worked out for me. But I don't know that there was anything wrong or if there was anything that I was, in disobedience to. Mm-hmm. It's just I went off of what I felt God was telling me to do at the time He was telling me to do it. And He hadn't specifically told me this is the only thing I want you to do. I was still functioning under, I want to do everything.
Right.
God, open up any door and I'll go through it. I was looking for broad. And God said, okay, now I'm going to narrow it down because I needed to be in Jacksonville. I needed to be under Dave Sispansky. Mm-hmm. I needed other things to fall into place before God could tell me, this is the thing I want you to do. And only this, evangelize. Got it. In this church, got it. At this time, got it. 100%, this is it. Wow. So there was a lot of factors involved. God had to get me where I needed to be. I had to be ready when God got me where I needed to be. So, like you said, in the meantime, you do what you know to do. So here's the story of the rich young ruler. Here's another Bible story. We always think about him as the guy who missed it, the greatest guy to never make it, right? The Bible says he came running, kneeling, and asking. I mean, I wish we all came to church running. I wish we were all kneeling in reverence. He's a ruler, but yet he's kneeling to a greater ruler and asking. He wanted to know. Everything's fine. What must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, you got to keep all the commandments. And he answered, Lord, all these things I've done since my youth. I love that. Jesus never doubted him. He agreed. And then he made the mistake that we all make from time to time. If you look at Mark 10, I think it is, in Matthew's version of it, I think it's Matthew 21, Matthew wherever it is, you read the two next to each other, and it paints a different picture. This man came running, kneeling, that's similar. They had the conversation, that's similar. He asked the question, what must I do? Jesus answered, that's similar in both Gospels. But then it takes it a little different. Matthew says something a little different, and then Mark says something a little different. When you put the two together, you get a bigger picture. And the picture is, he looked at Jesus and said, what else do I lack? What lack I yet? How many know that is the worst question you could ever ask Jesus? What one thing? And Jesus said, this one thing. Well, for me, it would have been this 50,000 things you lack. And it says that Jesus looked at him and loved him. Right. At that time, he asked the question, what do I lack? Jesus looked and loved him and then said, take all you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. And the Bible says he went away grieved. So what you find in that story is two wills of God. One is general. Obey God, keep the commandments, live for God, serve him. And then when the time is right, God will look at you and love you and activate his specific call. Wow. For him, leave all that you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. He didn't tell everybody to do that. He told him to do that. And he walked away grieved. His problem was he thought his life was his own. Wow. Here's the issue, right? When God's not calling us, we forget to live like he could at any time. So we give ourselves to hobbies, we give ourselves to careers, we marry who we want, we do what we want, we work where we want. We have our favorite football teams, like maybe the Cowboys. I don't know why you'd want to have them as your favorite football team. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're free to live, but when God calls, he's expecting you're going to give up all those things for his specific will to follow him. So for me, I lived for all those years just in the general. God, I'll do whatever you want. And it wasn't wrong. And then when he called me, and so, okay, it was during that Mark Olson sermon that God said, okay, this is what I want for you, is to settle down in this church, stay under this ministry, and labor as an evangelist until I tell you something different. That was him activating his specific call. And thankfully, I didn't turn away, for I had many possessions. I didn't have any possessions. That was an easy call to make right there, man, I said, yes, Lord, I will do it. And then we bought a house, and we settled down in Jacksonville. My kids found their destiny there. I'm finding my destiny there. And it all worked out perfect. So you have to understand there's general will of God that we're all called to do. And then there's specific will of God that is only for you to do. And when God is calling you for that, here's the key. You will know it. Wow. You will know it. When God calls you to something big like that, you're not going to have any doubt in your mind. People always struggle. And so I tell people, if you don't feel like God's calling you, don't worry about it. Live your life ready for him to call at any time. Settle it now that you're willing to give it all up when he does call. Because when he calls you, man, you will have no doubt in your mind that you will have to live your whole life on the power of that decision.
Yeah.
So he's going to make it so clear to you, you'll never doubt the choice you made.
Or that it's from him.
Or that it's from him.
Wow.
Yeah, you won't say, I got a tickle in my wickle. I think I'll be a missionary to this country. Well, do you even know the language? No. Do you even know where the country is? No. Do you know anything about it? No. But I felt a tingle at a conference when I looked at the flag, and God, you've called me to this. Listen, the will of God always comes with preparation, and it always comes with confirmation. He will prepare you, and then he will confirm it to you. So you'll have the confidence to be able to stand knowing I'm right where I need to be at the time I need to be here.
Wow. So that, like you said, there's basically, quote unquote, two, this is probably not right, but you said there's two callings basically. There's a general, and then there's the, I can't remember what else you said.
God-specific calling.
Specific calling, like that. So is the general just basically preparing you for that specific calling?
Yeah, absolutely. The general is serving where you can serve. And, being proactive. Like I said, I learned everything I could in the home church, not knowing if I was ever going to pastor.
Yeah.
But I wanted to learn this in case that was what I was called to do. So I generally served and developed all these skills to find out what I was good at, what I wasn't good at, because real ministry comes through human personality. That's where it's coming from. And, honestly, now looking back on my life and knowing myself, being an evangelist is the right call for my personality. It fits my personality. And, not everybody can do it. Not everybody can be on the road so much. Not everybody can be, gone traveling in your family. You got to have the right wife, the right kids. There's a lot of factors involved in doing it, especially doing it for a period of time and being successful in the long haul. And we do need evangelists in our fellowship, but I'll tell you, we need guys who are called to be evangelists, not guys who are in between churches, or I think I can do this too, or I'm waiting on paperwork, so I'll go preach a few meetings. We need guys that are long-term evangelists that will pioneer the ministry, that have all the substructure of being successful in their lives, the family, the finances and preparation, the home church that can support. There's a lot of factors in it. And so we need, long-term evangelists that have longevity and some experience. That's really going to be a blessing to our fellowship.
What's up, guys? So, technical difficulties happened. We kind of had a 2-hour episode. Amazing word from Pastor McLaughlin, so we decided to make another episode out of that. If not, it would have been a 2-hour episode. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a like, share, and check out other platforms. Please do. And look at the Instagram. We've been posting sneaky little peeks of the episodes and what we're doing behind the scenes. So please check us out on there. All right. Thank you guys so much. You guys have an amazing time.
Hey, everybody, this is Craig. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to this podcast. Maybe you're not a Christian and you heard what we had to talk about today, and you're haunted by the voices that are speaking into your mind. You're hearing lots of voices, and those voices are condemning you. Maybe those voices are convicting you. I know what it's like. Before I met Jesus, the worst time in my life was when I put my head on the pillow at night, just before I'd fall asleep. I'm not totally awake, and I'm not completely asleep yet. I'm in this twilight part of night. And I'll tell you, my voice would be crying out to me, telling me how much I needed God, telling me, convicting me. My conscience would be dry. I understand why people go to bed high or drunk, trying to silence those voices in their head. But there's another voice that we're speaking about today. The whole point of the podcast was to talk about God's voice speaking to you. Maybe you heard something in what we had spoken about your need to surrender your life to Jesus. That is God's voice speaking to you. He wants you to come home to him. And if you'll give up your sin and surrender your heart, you will come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. That is the last step that you need to take, the one voice that you need to listen to. If you will surrender Simply pray and ask Jesus to set you free. And I'd be willing to lead you in that prayer. It'd be my honor. So just close your eyes where you're at and just repeat this simple prayer. Say, Lord Jesus, come into my heart and save me. I know that I'm a sinner and that you're speaking to me right now. And I surrender my life to you. And from this day on, I will live for you and I will serve you. And set me free and still those voices in my head and bring healing in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thank you again for tuning into this podcast. And if you've prayed that prayer and you want some extra help, look down into the comment section below, into the description, find the contact information, and let us know. We'll be more than happy to help you in your new journey living for Jesus. Thank you.